Good morning, Rachel. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for
Honestly,
agreeing to join me and do an interview for my UCLA class. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
And you're talking to us from where?
Philadelphia, where it is now a whopping balmy 20 degrees, but the sun is shining, so I'm not complaining too much.
It was 47 when I drove in this morning.
Oh, God. Oh, my
So
gosh.
that's the beauty of being in Central California.
Oh, yes.
So, Rachel, for this class, we have a great number of different students who come from various backgrounds. We have students who are in schools working as counselors. We have people who are preparing to be independent counselors, people working in community-based organizations. So we have a wide range. And the topics for our class is special issues in education. So each week we're looking at different populations and how we can serve them better as an independent, as a counselor and an advisor. And so I wanted to talk to you because I know you're an expert in working with students with learning disabilities. So thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy person.
My absolute pleasure. It sounds like a great class. I'd like to take it.
Oh, you should be teaching one just on LD.
Oh,
So, so with whether you're in a schools or you're in working as a private counselor in a community-based organization, what are some signs that you can look for, or things that as a student comes into you that you notice that might, raise a question for you? What should we as counselors be looking for?
one of the easiest things to just see is how disorganized a kid is when they walk through your door. Do they come in kind of like the absent-minded professor kid would, papers falling out of the backpack and just really kind of discombobulated? Or are they coming in and they are a little too well organized? And those are two things that really, when I see that, it doesn't, in my practice, I know that anybody who comes in is coming in with a diagnosed learning disability. But it's always interesting to me to see the type of LD kid who is coming in. So particularly in schools, and many years ago I did work in a high school where it was just amazing that kids would come in, looking kind of like Pigpen from Charlie Brown, brilliant, bright kids who just couldn't get their act together, or they were so spotless you kind of worried a little bit. The reason that that's significant is because the kid who is disheveled and discombobulated generally, and I stress generally, is a kid with ADHD. That profile usually is a kid with a very high average or high IQ, very bright, and totally unable, not unwilling, but unable to really keep themselves on track. It's not the distractibility that we usually think of. There's so much going on in their head that they can't differentiate how to separate things out. Everything gets done, but it gets done in the most haphazard way. So that's that profile. The kid who comes in who is absolutely meticulous and organized and just, you want to love them, and you really do. These are kids who generally will have some sort of a processing disorder. They have learned over the years how to stay organized so that they can get their work done, because they do need extra time just to process information. So if you have a kid who's sitting in your office and they suddenly have a blank stare on their face, it's not that they've checked out and that they're not paying attention to what you're saying. It's that you're going too fast. They are two steps behind you, trying to figure out which computer file in their brain the information needs to go to, and you're already two steps ahead of them, and that's how they get lost. So it's really interesting. Let me just, I really want to emphasize that is not a blanket statement,
Right.
but that's sort of anecdotally what I've seen over the years. So as I say, if kids are coming in with that appearance, start paying attention. You know, sort of start framing your thinking into, this kid may have something else going on, and what should I do to start helping identify what might be going on.
I know one of the things that oftentimes I'll have parents tell me, and that's something that it becomes one of the clues, is they don't turn in their homework. You know, they do it, it's in their backpack, so it's part of that whole dishevelment. I know I did it, but I forgot when the due date is, and
absolutely, you know, absolutely.
That becomes one of those. So when you see some of these, you know, you have a student that is exhibiting one of these others, and you have some other things, maybe low test scores or a struggle in a particular subject. Then what do you do as a counselor? And there are different responsibilities that you have, whether if you're in a school versus as a private practice versus in a community-based organization. What steps should a counselor take?
Absolutely. And let me just stress, when I see that, that's just purely observational. The first thing I would do after that is, as you say, Cindy, I want to see transcripts. I want to see test scores. I would love to see some teacher evaluations, just to see how the kid is doing in class. That starts fleshing out a larger picture for me of what I need to do. Excuse me. So when that happens, I usually will, if I don't have teacher notes, I'll go talk to a teacher. I would ask, as an independent consultant, I would ask the parent for permission to talk with the school counselor and with some teachers. Perhaps a psychologist is already in the mix. I want to get a real sense of how this kid learns, where the strengths are, more than where the weaknesses are, because I can see a lot of the weaknesses. So I really want to be able to advise the student and the family what their steps should be. On the school counseling side, you might want to consult with a treatment team. If the kid has an IEP, you certainly want to have a conversation with people who are also identified as resources on that IEP. Again, the idea is to flesh out what are the strengths, because that's going to really guide how you can help them. You know, we're not going to, in the short period that we have kids during the school day from grades 9 to 12, we're not, none of us as consultants, as school-based counselors, we're not going to change the way they learn. All we can do is support the way they learn. There's a big difference there, and a lot of families think that, again, regardless if you're an independent consultant or a school-based counselor, they think we're in the business of changing the way the kids learn the material. And all we can do is accommodate them to their strengths. So that's, again, something that school-based people really, in many ways, it's easier because the treatment team, quote-unquote treatment team, is on site. Everybody is under the same roof. When you're a CBO person or you're an independent counselor, it's a little more legwork to sort of get all those pieces together. Once you have those pieces together and people just say, yes, I'm seeing the same thing. I'm not sure what it is that I'm seeing, but there is something there. Again, as an independent CBO counselor or school-based counselor, you can refer the child for psychoeducational testing to have an evaluation so that you can really start having some data to work with. And in that psychoed eval, there will be a lot of information that is going to be overwhelming to the counselors unless you're trained in working with that material. So if you are fabulous, you know, definitely that will lead you on one track. If you're not, then you can utilize the school psychologist, you can utilize outside psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody who is on Team Cindy, anybody who might be working with you, with the family, with you, the student, and the family. Those are the people that become our resources and our very best resources.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's where, as independents or community-based organizations, having a list of, or, have already built those relationships of, well, I'm going to refer this family to you for consultation, those kinds of things. I know in my area, I have a psychologist. She usually has to have a referral from a doctor, but because when they come from me, she'll take that as a referral. So those are the kinds of relationships that we need to
Yes.
make. And within the school as a counselor, I would refer them to the psychologist and we would have a meeting. So that's very helpful and very sage advice. So when you have a student and they've been diagnosed, either had a long-term diagnosis or a recent diagnosis, how do you tell parents that, yes, this child can go to college? And because a lot of times I think people think like, oh, well, if you have this means you can't go on in your education.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite moments when I'm working with a family, because in many cases, families have been told at best the kids can go to community college, maybe manage 1 or 2 classes. And, community college varies across the country, certainly around the world. They're very different, the community colleges have a very different approach to education depending on where you live. So the number one key that I have seen over the years where kids with learning disabilities will be successful is if they are motivated. If they want to go to school, they don't have to be, an A student, and they certainly, in 99% of the time, they're not failing kids. If they were failing, they wouldn't be able to graduate. So there is teachability. There is accountability, because they do hand in their homework, even if they can't find it half the time. So, but if a kid wants to go to college, there is a college for absolutely everybody. And our job is to help identify what are the colleges, what are the accommodations the kids need in college so that they can be successful. There are huge, huge differences between the available accommodations and the route to getting them in high school and in college. So let me just talk very, very briefly about that.
Good idea.
Because the laws are different, and families don't always know that. And certainly when we're working with high school kids, we don't always realize that an IEP can be helpful, but that by itself is certainly not going to get accommodations for kids. Whereas in high school, the IEP is the way you get accommodations for kids. So in college, the psychoed eval or the neuropsych eval, either one can be used. And very, very briefly, the difference is that a neuropsych will also test brain function. A psychoed eval will only test learning abilities. So either one of those 2 evaluations is the ticket for kids to get accommodations in the Office for Students with Disabilities. One of the things that I often say to kids all the time is I ask them if they're disabled. And I would say about 50% say yes and 50% say no. The truth is they are positively not disabled, because disabled means not being able to do something.
Right.
And if they are in 11th grade, they are able to do high school. Therefore, they will be able to do college. And just as a quick aside, because some of you might feel free to take this if you would like, I've been talking with you for a few minutes, and what you don't know is that I have a very profound disability, and it's right in front of your face. But you don't think of it that way, because if I take my glasses off, Cindy, I couldn't see you on my computer screen. I'm legally blind. I can't see. With my glasses, I can see into New Jersey. It's not a big deal. So I tell these kids, this is an accommodation. Right. And why on earth would I not use the accommodation? I want to be normal. I am normal. They are normal. But using accommodations makes their life so much easier, and it allows them to see, literally and figuratively. So I find that that often helps ease them into this notion of number one, needing to access the Office for Students with Disabilities. The law that provides accommodations for kids is written into the Americans with Disabilities Act. So thus, colleges must use that word, and that's all it is a word. In high school, we talk about learning differences, learning difficulties. We change the language in a way that is useful and helpful in high school, but does not prepare LD kids for that fierce reality in college. So that's one piece. The other piece is, excuse me, once the kids have accommodations in college, there's a variety of ways that those accommodations are delivered in college. In high school, those accommodations are delivered through the teachers and through the treatment teams again. In college, it is the child's responsibility, the student's responsibility to access accommodations. In high school, it's the adults in that student's world, whether it's parents or school counselors, teachers, the principal. It's always an adult. The student is certainly included, but it is not the sole responsibility of the student to make sure that accommodations are granted, and not only granted, implemented. And in college, that's totally different. So you asked me before about parents who are told that their kids can't go to college. Here are ways they totally can go. But we need to, as counselors, regardless of where we practice, we need to prepare parents to educate them about the ability for accommodations, number one, to be granted, how to access them through the psychoed eval or the neuropsych eval, which can be done in school or privately. The many colleges want that evaluation to be done within 3 years of going to college. It's not so much a time issue as it is a testing issue. Kids under the age of 16 are given tests that measure them using child measures, and over 16 using adult measures. Colleges want adult measured testing. So, and basically it breaks down into needing cognitive testing that's done using adult measures. So again, as school-based or independent counselors or CBO counselors, if this is not an area with which you've got a lot of comfort and knowledge, find people in your community who do. Either refer the student to them if it's a private client. If it's a school-based client, talk with your school psychologist. They will certainly help you understand if the testing is appropriate, not understand what the testing says necessarily, but if they are on track. And then you can start developing college lists that will provide the support for the kids that they need. You can have 2 kids in your office, both with ADHD. Both will have very, very different needs, therefore different college lists.
Excellent, excellent. So as a counselor advisor, as I go visit these colleges, what kind of questions should I ask just so that I know and am informed about what the options are? So when a student comes in my office and says, I want to go to, X school, what should I look for when I go visit colleges?
Great question. When I visit colleges, the most important person on a college campus for me is the Office for Students with Disabilities. I want to meet with the director, and I also want to meet with somebody who is actually sitting with the kids. In many cases, it is the director. Some cases, it just is school specific of how the services are given to the kids. But when you visit a college, admissions people rarely are familiar with the disability services that are provided. Yeah. In fact, 98% of college admissions offices don't even want to know that a kid has a learning disability. A learning disability is not going to prevent a kid from going to college, and it's not going to give them an advantage because they have a disability. It amounts to zero in the application process. However, for us, for us doing LD work, that's the most important piece, because we want to be sure that the kids are getting their academic needs met, or else the whole system falls apart. So visiting a campus, getting a sense, obviously, doing a campus tour and talking with admissions is important, but not as important as the disability office. So when you visit, you need to add extra time to that visit, schedule an appointment to meet with somebody in the disability office. And the questions are, who is the right kid for your services? And who is a kid that, if I sent a kid to a school, Quinnipiac, for instance, in Connecticut, is a great school, but not for a kid who's got profound learning disabilities, particularly ADHD. And I don't mean to pick on Quinnipiac. I love Quinnipiac, and I send several kids to Quinnipiac, but the disability service office there is one where the kids have to be very, very strong self-advocates to get the accommodations that they need. So I will send a kid there who can articulate what they need and be able to work independently with a learning specialist there. So that's information I want to know. That's an example of, yes, they've got services, but what is it that they provide, and what type of kid is going to be successful? If you've got a student who really needs an awful lot of hand-holding, then there are much better options out there for that kid than a kid necessarily like Quinnipiac. The majors may be the same, all of the factors that we all take into consideration, what the kid is interested in, geography. In the Northeast, weather has become a big thing. It's so cold here, everybody wants to go to school in California and Florida. That's this week, But it's really about finding the services that the school can provide. The last thing any of us want to do to a student is recommend a school that can't support them and have them go there. And on the college side is to have them go there and then have the college feel that, oh my God, why did Rachel send this kid to me? So that's the piece that for me is the most important piece. And when you visit, please, if this is work that you want to do, you really need to start learning who does what well. Everybody does something. And let me just quickly say that any college that accepts federal money by law has got to provide support services for students with learning disabilities. However, the law does not say what those services need to be. So those services range from peer mentoring to master's level learning specialists. That's a big difference. So again, knowing who does what well and what your students' needs are is how we make those matches.
That's so key, and that's so important, and it does make a difference for our students, and that's what finding the right match and the right fit is all about, and it's going to be unique for each student. So Rachel,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I know my students are going to really enjoy. If they have any questions or anything as a follow-up, what would you recommend?
Absolutely. Feel free to contact me. Email is always best. Cindy, you have my email, but I will tell you it's Rachel, Rachel, at collegepossibilities.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. Just I ask that in the subject area, please write in Cindy's online class, because if I get an email from somebody I don't recognize, I will probably delete it, because I did have a virus many years ago. I've still not recovered. So just let me know that you're part of Cindy's class. I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again soon.
You too, Cindy. My pleasure.
Right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.